with that, let's jump into this stuff. The first thing we're going to talk about, and hang on, okay, because it's all important, has to do with your rights and your benefits, right? So the first one we're going to talk about is the Major Richard Starr Act. And I want to dive into it a little bit because this bill, as you guys know, has stalled over the last several months. And right now it's starting to get resuscitated. And the only way that I see it getting kicked over the finish line here is really we'll call it a grassroots effort. If the veteran sphere feels as though we need to have this happen for the greater good of veterans, then we need to be reaching out to our congressional members and making some noise at the constituency level. Now, before we dive into the article or news release from the Veterans Senate or the Veterans Committee at the Senate, I wanted to just pass it over to you, Randy. Give me just kind of your brief as a recently retired, now full-fledged veteran, right? Who's retired. You don't quite fall into the boat for the Major Richard Starr Act, but you can definitely understand some of it. So I'd just love to hear your kind of overview on it. We'll get Chris's kind of overview. We'll dive into it a little bit and then kind of dismantle kind of where we're at. So Randy, without further ado.
Yeah, let's talk about the cliff that happens at 50%. So when you are 50% service connected by the VA and you are retired for whatever reason, we'll just go wave tops here. That 50% that you are receiving each month in compensation for your injuries or illnesses that are service connected from the VA is not offset against any pension benefits that you may be receiving due to your retirement. However, at 40%, there is an offset. Now, why do I go from 40% to 50%? That is because the VA rounds up or rounds down depending on which side of 45 you're on. So if you're at 44%, they'll round down to 40 and an offset occurs. If you're at 47%, once they do all their funny math and add everything up, then you're 50. Magically, you're bumped up 3% and the offset does not occur. So the question then becomes, if Sergeant Snuffy and Sergeant Smith, who have both served 20 years and one is rated 50% and the other is rated 40%, what inherently makes that large of a difference for Sergeant Snuffy? What makes it fair for him to get more while the other party has an offset occur? Now, there's a whole nother element to this. We're going to get into it once Jason gets rolling with the article. But what do we do about those that have various forms of medical retirements or medical discharges? There's a little bit of a nuance here when we get into the Major Richard Starr Act. But just from the wave tops, 40 versus 50, is it fair and is it not fair to offset, and why? And how did we get here? So that's what I got for you, Jason. Excuse me. I'm going to throw it back over to you because I know we're itching to get into the article and let you take us through it.
Well, I'm not going to let you do that. I have a question.
Do it.
So when we're talking offsets, we're basically saying that you can't double up on these things, right? So is it like, is there a calculation? Like, how do they determine how much gets offset?
Dollar for dollar, as far as I understand it. Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, but it is dollar for dollar offset. So, you lose the entirety of that benefit at 40% through offset, whereas at 50%, you get all of it. And that is substantial. And then it's even more substantial when you start factoring in kids and wives and whoever else. So it's kind of a mess here, guys. But that's my quick answer to you, Chris. Jason, I'll let you, chime in too. And you're on mute, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Randy. So here's the thing, is that we're talking about several different things here. With regard to offsets, yes, it's dollar for dollar. And sadly, that's the case. And I'll give an example here in a second. But first, let's kind of clarify the three groups of individual veterans. Okay, if we can clarify veterans, including retirees, into three kind of categories. Okay, one, you have the retiree, period. That's going to be a veteran who served 20 plus years in the military and has retired. Smooth sailing.
Correct.
The second batch here is going to be the most common, which is just a non-retired veteran. Okay. And actually, I'm going to give you 4 groups. So you have the non-retired veteran. I did my 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, 10 years, however long I did. I got out. I'm a veteran. I could still file for my VA claim stuff. Yeah, me too, Chris. And so that's a second category. A third category is medically discharged. Right? You did your 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, and you got hurt so bad that they deemed you non-deployable, and really you're not really going to be a good cog in the military system. So they discharge you from the military. So that's the third kind of group. The fourth group here is medically retired. Okay. So we have just a standard veteran, a medically discharged, a medically retired, and a retired. Okay, that's kind of our 4 categories. Now, when we're talking about offsets, that specifically only affects 2 groups. One is your retiree who is rated less than 50% rating with the VA. So that 44 and down, they have an offset. So if they get $300 from the VA and their retirement is $4,000, well, now they get $4,700 for their retirement and $300 tax-free from the VA. They offset it dollar for dollar, and off you go. This is why it's so important for retirees to hit the 50% mark, which, in my opinion, the longer you're in the military, the more opportunity there is for things to go wrong, and the more likely you should be at 50% or higher. Just saying. And when you also include secondaries and so forth. The other group that has to deal with this offset is your medically retired. But medically retired has no light at the end of the tunnel. It doesn't matter if they get to 50%. Okay. Even if they were 100% rated veteran, military retiree, medically retired veteran here, even if they ended up being 100% with the VA, that would be the maximum amount that they're going to receive from everything. Because let's just, for example, say that Sergeant Snuffy got medically retired after 16 years of service. Obviously, 16 years, the eye on the prize was, hey, I'm going to do 20 or 30, right? I'm going to, work my whole retirement here. Unforeseen circumstances, Sergeant Snuffy's life changes overnight. Now, all of a sudden, retired with, oh, by the way less retirement than what would have happened if he would have stayed in, right? Because now your time in service is substantially less. So a smaller retirement, which is a fork in the eye to begin with. Then what happens is, now let's say that retirement's, well, I'm just going to use $3,000 a month for easy numbers. Retirement's $3,000 for medical retirement. Goes and gets rated with the VA, ends up being 100% rated. They're going to offset that $3,000 to VA and just call you a 100% rated veteran, and you get no medical or no military retirement at that point. So there's no way for them to collect both, and it is such a slap in the face for our service connected brothers and sisters out there who were trying to get 20 years or more under their belt, obviously. Otherwise, they would just be medically discharged. They wouldn't be medically retired. Huge distinction. And I think that that's one of the things that people out there need to understand is we're not talking about the person who did 3 years and now all of a sudden they're medically retired. No, they just got medically discharged. Okay. There's no way that somebody who did 3 years is going to be medically retired from the military. No, they're not going to receive a retirement. Now they could get some sort of, special kind of severance package or something weird like that. Who knows? But it's not going to be a retirement. So that's not who we're talking about. We're talking about the people who are medically retired.